If you're a coach, you want to make team management a lot easier on the platform. And if you're a scout, to make talent acquisition as easy as possible. So those essentially are the value offerings that we're trying to give the three main users of our platform. And we had these other guys who came to us. They're like, "Yeah, we've seen this app, 2 million." That time Simon and I were like, okay, we don't really have any much funding. But we were like, man, if these guys want 2 million, no, man, let's just, say no. Very a big believer of, there's this thing they say, if the person is right to hire within 2 days, because I don't think you can control people, and I think people drive themselves, and I just want to be able to say, I'd rather be with people who I can trust in driving themselves than to try and control people.
You don't hire people to tell them what to do, you hire them to tell you what to do.
That started a very interesting journey, which has become the past basically 7 years of my life. And that meant me and Simon coding every day from we call it all-nighters, which is basically 8 at night until 4 in the morning for a good 10 months before we had the prototype.
So you had to teach yourselves how to code.
Yeah.
Because that's not your background, right? Hey, Lesego. Welcome, bud. How you doing, man?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
No, I'm happy that you're here. I've been following your story. Totally cool, dude. One journey, right?
Yeah, definitely a tough one.
For our viewers, maybe let's bring them up to speed. How did it all start? I want the from day zero type stuff, where you grew up and the background stuff.
Okay, thank you for that. It's quite a lot to say, to be honest. It's been quite a long journey.
Yeah.
Very enjoyable for myself, of course. And I think essentially the main part is I grew up in Soweto. And
where?
In Pimville.
Yeah, DKNY.
Yeah, DK.
Yeah.
Very, very close to me as well. I mean, our videographer is from there as well. So
yeah, Pimville,
really appreciate
beautiful women. Yeah.
I mean, Conker's there, so. So I grew up playing a lot of sports, really. In primary, I experimented with a lot of sports, whether it was tennis, hockey, cricket, rugby eventually.
So you were an athlete?
Yeah, I just enjoy sports pretty much. I just enjoy playing different types of sports. And I think growing up, probably when I got to grade 9 is when I was a bit more entrepreneurial. I shifted into more business mindset, starting reading a lot of books. I think what I appreciated the most was growing up, my mom made me read a lot. So I was really an avid reader, but more fantasy books, your Harry Potters and stuff like that. But then when I got to grade 9, I started to use that for business books and more, knowledge-based work. So, I think...
Where was your dad?
My dad was definitely present in my life, I think from mostly after high school, because growing up he was pretty much busy. He was a pilot at the time and he was traveling a lot. So our relationship became a lot more closer from high school. And he's also an entrepreneur. In fact, both my parents are entrepreneurs. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm very outlandish and in my own space and very comfortable with who I am and very confident in what I want to do, because I had parents that could be who they were, growing up. And that's what I appreciated most about them. So, when I got to...
Out of that, just out of interest, because we're seeing a pattern, almost every guest or entrepreneur, there's someone who was entrepreneurial in their family that influenced them. So, which begs the question, are entrepreneurs made or born? Which you think?
I would say made, because definitely if you look at entrepreneurship as a parameter, you would say you get better the more you entrepreneur, right? So that would mean it's a skill that could be taught or acquired.
Yes.
So having said that, at the same time, I think obviously, your primitive years, as they like saying a lot, are very influential in terms of how you are, because it starts to affect how you do things without exactly thinking about them. And I think that becomes very important the older that you get,
So then you went to school. You said, did you go study afterwards? And where did the love for sports end and be replaced by entrepreneurship? And at which point did that happen?
No, it's definitely there a collaboration, hence I'm in sports tech,
Yes.
BallTalent.
Yeah.
And I would say from high school, really, I think the first thing that I wanted to do was a billboard company, right? Because at the time I was still in school and I wanted to have a business. And obviously I'm going to class every day. So it's like, what company can I run whilst I'm still at school? And a billboard company at the time seemed the best because it's like I can just rent a board and then, get a station and then essentially rent it out, right? But then I told my mom and she's like, hey man, I'm paying your school fees. I'm not going to give you capital for like, some billboard company you're trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, interestingly enough, I then shifted into more technology-based stuff. I was reading a lot of biographies, watching a lot of, YouTube videos about like the upbringing of different tech titans in America, of course, because most of my love was around software, really, and computers, and that evolved more from matric. And at that point, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was very clear in my life. I knew that. And I decided to do marketing because my research at the time in matric said that if you want to be an entrepreneur, marketing is the best degree to have. Because essentially you design the product, you understand how to sell it, and you can essentially start a business, with a marketing degree. And I told my parents that that's what I would like to do. And they were like, okay, I mean, obviously you're very passionate about this. You're in love with what you're doing. At the time, BallTalent wasn't even in the frame yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to do marketing, actually. Yeah.
And I mean, would that be still a recommendation you would give for someone who's watching and thinking, well, they're not quite sure what they want to do after high school? Do you think that's panned out the way you expected it?
I mean, for me personally, definitely, because it's my interest, But I would also suggest that any entrepreneur should really be focused on what their passion or, let me say, interest is.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get entrepreneurs from different backgrounds, right? You could have an entrepreneur who's maybe a biochemist who studied biology, or, people who are in agriculture and
Such
did
a
like
good point.
soil science. But the point is they went deeper into whatever their
because
interest
of their
was,
passion.
Yeah. And then essentially that's, let's say, deepness into their interests unravels sort of like the creation, the product, something new. And then you will need business people to help you sell it and all of that. But to be able to create the first thing that's going to change the game, you have to have a very deep interest that no one else probably has. So you'd have to do something in line with what you're passionate about, really.
And did you still do sports while you were at varsity, for example?
Yeah, varsity, definitely. I was still more like playing five-a-side football, definitely not like living aside like high school days.
Yeah.
And I was doing a bit more like tennis, chess. Those are my side of sports in varsity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really what I took most about varsity was that it was a space where I got to meet a lot of good people, to be quite honest. I was able to surround myself with people that were really passionate about what they were doing. I think for me, like, that's essentially my team, as well, is like everyone I work with are people that love what they do. And I'm also a big believer of, there's this thing they say, if the person is right to hire within 2 days, because I don't think you can control people, and I think people drive themselves. And I just want to be able to say, I'd rather be with people who I can trust in driving themselves than to try and control people. So that's essentially how I feel.
Wow. I mean, I think a lot of people want to stand there in the front and say, this is my production line, and see people in, in stations and say, you do. That is so insightful that takes up so much energy because you are trying to control a human being, which is so hard. Rather find the right people and let them do what they're passionate about.
Exactly, because I mean, at the same time, right? Obviously, you do have to have structure.
Yeah.
Right. You need structure within a team. That's why it's called a team or an organization. There's a structure that has to be in place. But once the structure is set and you know who needs to fulfill certain roles, just give it to the people to do what they do best, And I think that's what works out the best at the end of the day, because also I may be very close to people that I work with. For example, our videographer, right? He knows football really well. He's been shooting games from high school pretty much. And I met him when we were actually recording a tournament ourselves, right? And since then, he's been an integral part of BallTalent. And my point is that I met him on the journey, and he was doing his own thing at the time. And essentially, since then, we've been able to have huge synergies. And that's why I say people who enjoy their work are the best to work with.
I think it was Steve Jobs who said, you don't hire people to tell them what to do. You hire them to tell you what to do. Right? Because otherwise, why are you bringing them on board? But then post-varsity, did you ever go get told what to do? In other words, did you work for somebody else?
Yeah. Hey, it was pretty hectic. Obviously, I did marketing, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, I got into like telemarketing in terms of banking related. So I was looking for a banking company, and it was just a lot of like trying to get clients for the company. And that was like for a good year.
You sound like you hated it.
No, not that I hated it. It was just that like it wasn't really where my energy was at. At the time, it was just to say like I can work, I can get a job, I can do what, it should be deemed normal, right? But I knew that I wanted to do my own thing, I had my own interests, and funny enough, I saw the book here earlier on because I was asking them, I was like, who has the props for the book? But there's a book here called by Jason Lee, 10 Simple Steps to Property Wealth, right?
Yeah.
And my co-founder of BallTalent, Simon, and also at the time we wanted to do like property after varsity because we were like, what can we actually do right now? And property seemed very simple because buy a house, renovate it, sell it. Then it's like, okay, where's the capital? And that's how we got into software. It was a realization that we could create a business from a skill, and you don't have to hire a huge dev team or get all these other people to do things for you. You could essentially learn the skill and then create the product. And that's why essentially from that point, my love for software just grew, because it made me realize that, first of all, we don't need, like a lot of outside things to be able to do the innovation that we believe is needed in the game. And that's why software, has been the biggest game changer for us both.
But what was the actual step from working for the bank to literally starting the business? Like, what and also what was the catalyst in you?
So at the time, as I'm saying, I already had tried a couple of business ideas. I wanted a billboard company. Simon and I wanted to do like property at the time. And so essentially when I was ending off my job, I then got a bursary for accounting, right? And it was like more like a learnership thing. So they would pay you and you study, right? So I was like, okay, cool. I'm definitely going to do that. I took accounting in high school as well. So I did accounting, business, and physics, right? So I was like, accounting bursary, come my way. Did that with ACCA. And whilst I was doing that, Simon was also doing computer science and mathematics, right? So
Simon is your partner?
Yes, my co-founder. Yeah. A very close friend as well. Over 20 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And at that time, we were like, okay, we need to create something, right? And we knew that software was going to be the way we could try and create a product. But we didn't know what at the time, right? And obviously, both of us were like based in an area whereby we've seen good players, And I think even from the schools that I went to.
When you say good players, you mean soccer players?
Yeah, good soccer players. Mostly, I'd say soccer players because that's who I would watch the most growing up. And a lot of them, you'd just be like, what happened to them, Or it'd be like, a few years later, you'd see them and you're like, oh, what happened? I thought you had trialed at a big club, or you're going to get a contract or something like that. And it's like, it didn't work out. Or there's money, things inside there. Or some of them, it was just their parents, So a lot of them, you'd just be like, really the main issue was like a lack of exposure at an early age, to the right, let's say, systems or the right, let's say, clubs as well. So we were like, okay, clearly this is a huge gap. First of all, it's something that isn't there in the game right now. There's no platform that is actively sourcing sporting talent and trying to connect them to international scouts at the same time, right? And at the time, we were then like, okay, then let's create it. And essentially then that started a very interesting journey, which has become the past basically 7 years of my life. And that meant me and Simon coding every day from like, we call it all-nighters, which is basically 8 at night until 4 in the morning for a good 10 months before we had the prototype.
So you had to teach yourselves how to code.
Yeah.
Because that's not your background, right?
Definitely.
But we luckily live in a world where you can. There's no intrinsic reason why you can't do it, which I suppose was your earlier point, is that you don't need lots of dev teams or people. You can learn the skill, you know what the product is, and then just build it. And that's what those all-nighters were doing.
That's what essentially it was. It was a way for us to acquire the skill in a very short space of time, because we dedicated a huge amount of hours to that. I mean, it was the point where, our parents were like, what are you guys doing, man? You guys are up every day, all day, you're not getting paid. What's going on, But it was like, hey, we just fell in love with it, because I think what was so great about it was, when we started, it was just like, oh, we want an app, And then it's like, oh, how do you make an app? And you're like, oh, there's front end. Oh, there's back end. Oh, there's servers. Oh, there's cloud. So a lot of complexity starts to come into play to actually make the overall vision that you want. But at that time, we didn't see that outer, landscape we were trying to build, or even technological stack that we were going to use. It was just like, can we make the word BallTalent appear on a page, whether it's just on a white page, And then it was like, okay, cool, we can do that. Now let's try and add a video. Oh, we have to now go record local games, Ekasi. So that's how I just started off.
Why not just use YouTube?
In terms of sourcing content?
Ultimately, you are recording athletes.
Yeah.
And you are trying to create exposure. Why didn't you just create a YouTube channel that does that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously YouTube would be great in terms of being able to watch talent, but then your data points on the players, your ability to message the coaches of those players as well. Because also we don't want to be agents, right? We don't want to become the middlemen ourselves, essentially. We just want to become a platform that will enable both sides, meaning both players and scouts, to be able to facilitate discovery. And
so maybe then let's do that and give it the justice it deserves. So what does the platform actually do? But let's bring it back to, I'm a player. So I play local soccer. So what age am I? Am I in a schooling system? Am I like who's it targeted to?
So BallTalent is targeted for right now any athlete, right?
Right.
You could say below 22, really. We don't really have a cut-off age at this point, but 22 and less is what we primarily focus on. So I can give you an example, right?
Sure,
so
please.
As I said, I'm from Pimville. So Pimville Cameroon is on our application, right? Their whole team is there, right? From juniors, from under 9 to open team, right? So on the platform, what we allow is, if you're a player, you can then log on onto the platform. Of course, you can also maintain your own data points, which are relevant for scouts as well. And then they can watch their own content, which we record of them, right, for video analysis purposes, for them to improve their game.
So what you would go to, how would you know what games to go to record them?
So essentially at this point, what we do is we work with a lot of LFAs, which are essentially local football associations. And what that means is, like in Soweto, we go to the Soweto Football Association and we say, okay, what is the league table for the past season? And we say, okay, maybe there's 10 teams in the league. We'll focus on the top 6 for now. And then maybe towards the end of the year on the last 4, So essentially what we do is the LFAs tell us the teams which are the best to focus on in a region. Yeah. And that's how we go and cover those games.
And you cover them regularly.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole camera crews that go out and...
Yeah, definitely.
That is super cool, man.
Definitely, yeah. And local games.
Yeah.
Because the main point was that a lot of urban, let's say, players or urban clubs, obviously they're already within, the system at play. So it's quite easy for them to get discovered or to be within reach of typical big
Scouts.
clubs, right? But then your remote areas, I mean, even Soweto itself is like massive in terms of how many teams are there, and only a few of them are really focused on, and you have a lot more other teams that go unwatched essentially. And when you start to expand, obviously then within the province and the country, there's a lot of remote areas that really don't get any focus in terms of coverability of talent in these areas.
But what are you covering in that instance? Are you covering the entire game, or are you looking for individual players within that game?
So that goes back to why I said YouTube, right?
Yeah.
So another reason is that on our platform, because everyone always says, why can't we just upload our own stuff, right? And it's like, essentially we're trying to create an open standard at this point, right? Because we've spoken to scouts from all clubs around the world, right? And they've told us the format in which they want their games to be recorded, right? So they can analyze these games. So essentially, how we record our matches is in line with what the scouts are essentially looking for, right?
And is that different to what if I was watching?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely. Compared to like your Super Sport,
like a normal game, yeah.
SABC, those, yeah, definitely. Like compared to televised sports, it's completely different.
In what sense?
So obviously, with television, you get a lot of close-up shots. You know, you zoom in,
Yes.
at certain moments. Maybe not all the players are in field, because scouts will be like, okay, when the player's not on the ball, what is he doing? You know, what's his positioning? Where is he? So there's a lot of which you should take into account in terms of when you have the whole field in play for the scout able to analyze the player's performance.
But you mentioned that you do this for all sports. So far, we've obviously focused on soccer.
Yeah.
How do you do that for other sports?
So in regards to other sports, that's really been something which we've done this year, right? Of course, when we created BallTalent, our main mission was to do scouting for all sports actually. Not
Then
soccer.
why call it
Not soccer.
BallTalent?
Because we felt that all sports have a ball. I mean, I don't know if there's any other sport, but I don't know. Maybe you can name a sport for me that doesn't have a ball. I can't think of one.
Swimming.
Definitely true.
You know, I that's just top of my mind.
Yeah.
But if I applied
good
myself, I'm sure I could. Boxing. I'm warming up.
Very good. Very good.
But the point is, you wanted your platform to be as open as possible. Okay.
And to have a name that essentially would communicate sports and talent, and to say that any sport, essentially, we could try and link scouts to local talent.
So how many, for example, talent is on your platform now?
I think last time I spoke to Simon, we have like over 1,000 players now. So we're heading towards, our goal for end of the year is 2,000 players. But that right now currently is mostly a football database of players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, most of them being from the township, being from Soweto, being from Alex. These are a lot of the areas we focus on. East Rand as well, because that's where our current reach is really. But to say that what we started to do this year was we started to work with another company called USA Smart Recruitment Agency, right? And essentially they're a company that does scholarships for, let's say, student athletes, right? So people that are typically maybe just finished matric or are trying to improve their grades. And what they do is, based on your athletic performance, they can get you a scholarship overseas, right?
Oh, wow, that's super cool.
Yeah.
So that's now your supply chain side. Like
essentially. So they're not the only one, but we have a lot of partners in that sense that work with
your demand
universities.
Side.
A lot of universities that are looking to get players, essentially, right? So what happened was they already have players that they've placed overseas, right? And when they came back for the summer holiday, we essentially did what we call like a battery test, right? A more common term in sports, right? Which essentially is just a test you conduct on a player to see their fitness levels and other characteristics that they may have, right? So what we then did with them was essentially to test the players that they have sent overseas. And now locally we have trials to try and see which players can we benchmark against those players. And then essentially players that are amongst that level are the ones that the universities will then look at or request additional information on.
So how do you make money?
So how we make money essentially is the main vision of the platform, right? Is that we want scouts and universities to be able to pay for access to the platform, right? To be able to source this talent. And that would be a subscription-based model, right? But how we've been making our money at the current point in time has been through a lot of recordings from parents and players. So we also do like recordings. So essentially, if you go on our app, you could like book us to record your game because you have like players who are like,
so cool.
Yeah, if you're like a good player, you're like, hey, I want to play a video essentially, like to make a reel for me, but for the scouts, of course.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so you could like go on our app, you can book us for
But I'm
recordings.
assuming those are the private schools that are calling you for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, mostly a lot of private schools. I would say a lot more urban areas, like you would say, but you do get teams from the township that their coaches would then take it upon them to say, okay, I have a player that I would like to probably cover, or they would want us to actually record their team's game, right? So I think another thing we should also make clear, right, essentially is BallTalent has 3 primary users, right? The first obviously being the players, who are the main focus of the platform. And these are the people that the scouts, the second users, are coming to
See.
find, right? And then you have the key person in between, which is the coach, the person that actually manages the play as well. So all of these three users are essentially the main users of the platform. And we've designed it in a way that we want to empower all of them in terms of their sporting journeys. So what that means is if you're a player, we want to make you being able to improve your game easier through video analysis, right, on the platform. If you're a coach, we want to make team management a lot easier. On the platform. And if you're a scout, to make talent acquisition as easy as possible. So those essentially are the value offerings that we're trying to give the three main users of our platform.
What about schools? It seems to me that would be a very good candidate, right? They've got a log, they've got different sporting codes, they're in the same place, and they play other schools. It just seems like it would be a nice, I don't know, supply chain for you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We do also record school games, right? So on our platform as well, we have both clubs and schools, right? So it is a combination, hence the age group that we focus on, right? Because you do get athletes or players who may not have a professional club or club that they play for, but they obviously play at school.
Right.
And you also get some who play at school, but they don't have a club.
Yeah.
And then you get some who actually play both. So essentially that's where the difference comes in.
Do you think you would have done this business if you didn't love sports?
No. I mean, I watch sports every day. So, that's why it's not really like a business per se.
Yeah, it's a love.
It's more like a life. Because there was this other article I was reading recently, right, from Harvard, and it was talking about, it was dispelling the whole myth of how everyone likes to say, oh, you need a work-life balance, They're like, nah, guys, it's actually a work-life integration.
Yeah.
Right? Your work is also your life, right? And that's how I feel, because on Saturday when I wake up and I go to the grounds and I record a game, it doesn't feel like work. I'm like doing what I enjoy, which is going to Ekasi and seeing people play and finding out talent and hearing from the people in the fans telling me that, oh, this is a player that was here last week and is good. This is a player you should be focusing on. Those are the things that I enjoy about my day that really make it worthwhile.
I was what was this article I was reading about? I suppose the work-life integration part. Would you? Okay, let's put it this way. Let's say I've got a check right now, and I can sign you over. I can cut a check for you to grow, scale your love, your passion, right? Firstly, how much should I sign you over for? And how long would it take to get it to a point where you'd be happy that your business is at the point that you think it could be?
The level we want it to be at. So, I mean, first let me say we've had some offers, right? We have had offers.
Look at you.
When we started, even, which is even more funny. And we said no, right? At the time, it was like literally a year into what we were doing. And we had these other guys who came to us. They're like, yo, we've seen this app, 2 million. That time, Simon and I were like, okay, we don't really have any much funding. But we were like, man, if these guys want 2 million, it's like, no, man. Let's just, say no. So my main point is that currently where we see BallTalent and in terms of the backing we already have, because, I mean, we worked with amazing partners. We worked with Telkom. We worked with the SAP Foundation. We work with TIA, the innovation agency, a really great support that we have. So to take BallTalent to a growth part, we're looking at 12 to 14 million.
And what time frame would you want to?
2 years for that.
So 14 bar, 2 years, you'll be, what would be the KPI for success?
That would be a self-sustaining business. Definitely, it would reach a self-sustaining business that could, firstly, obviously meet its own costs, right? Not be a startup anymore. But most importantly, it would allow for us to take the app across the continent because, of course, that's the main vision, right? Is to allow for BallTalent to be the main intersection for African talent to be discovered everywhere in the world.
Is there competition?
I mean, I don't think direct competition in terms of exactly what we're doing, but you definitely have adjacent, let's say, product offerings. But most of them are actually people that you can work with, surprisingly. I mean, for example, Walter Mugwena, he has an app called My Sportsbook. And on there, players can sign up themselves, and they can also have profiles, and upload their own content as well. And we also work with him, in terms of his player database. And yeah, there's also like, let me say, more traditional form of competition, like
scouts.
Yeah, normal scouts
yeah.
and agents who maybe private individuals, right? And it was like, we can actually help you find talent, if not suggest you the talent on our platform to you as well. So I don't think we've had any direct competition, because the only main competitor that we see is called Y Scout. And Y Scout is European based, but professional football. They don't do youth football. So that's really the main difference. And also they don't focus on Africa as well. So those are really the two differentiators from us and them.
So your point is the market is huge,
Yes.
and you are currently, sure, there's peripheral competition, but you are a leader in this space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at BallTalent when it came out, which is 2019, since then there's definitely been a number of product offerings in terms of, players getting scouted, coming out. Super Sports Schools came out like probably just a year, 9 months after we launched.
Are you working with them?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Definitely love to.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of great movement in the game since we launched, and that's really what we want, because one thing which is quite interesting is all of the players that we've assisted to go abroad are like women players, right?
That was man, you literally just stole it out of my mouth. My next question was, but what about the ladies?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, it's funny because when we started BallTalent, of course, I mean, we're guys. So we would go and record guys, right?
Yeah.
It would be quite typical to think that. But then, at the time, the players that we were suggesting to overseas scouts are like, they're not really there, they're not that level. Give us a woman player or two, right? And then we started to realize, okay, actually, the men's game is a bit more saturated. Of course, it's a lot more developed. It's had a lot more money over the years, right? So the standard is a lot higher. But then when you start to look at the women's game, it's still developing. It's still growing. You look at like the Women's World Cup and the quality of it, it's been growing over the past few years. And South Africa is in a very special place because we have a lot of women that actually play football, right? And funny enough, most of them will tell you they play with guys actually, growing up especially. And that has led to a lot of technically gifted players, right? And I think South Africa is in a position where we have a lot of women talent that is still being discovered, but also to say that our standard of players is just a lot higher than a lot of other places.
But are there clubs and leagues, and is the schools accommodating female players?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So, do you mean from South Africa or internationally?
South Africa specifically.
I mean, locally you have the Hollywood Bets Women's League, right? Which is the premier women's league in the country, and Hollywood has been backing that for like a good 3 years now. Before that, there wasn't there. You used to have the SASA Women's League, which is still there, which became the second tier for women's football, right? And which is another league which we hugely focus on, because the SASA Women's League is essentially the developmental league for the women's game as well. So those are the two main leagues in which women players start to play professionally within the country, right? And then when you start to look at from a high school perspective, not really as much, to be honest, in terms of women's sports taking place, like women's football specifically. But I think the growth is definitely there.
You raise an interesting point that I actually wanted to ask you earlier about betting. I'm seeing a lot of gambling organizations massively infiltrating sport. And what we've seen, because we work with all sorts of entrepreneurs in universities and stuff, and gambling is a super big problem at university level. I worry that we are making gambling fashionable and gamifying it. I mean, what is your thoughts about that? And now all of a sudden it's everywhere as well. And it's on mobile platforms.
It is. I mean, gambling has proliferated the game, right? Like, probably for the past, I would say 4 years, there's been a bit more of a push on it, especially within the country, right? And, I mean, staying in Soweto, I mean, you see it everywhere, right? I mean, he has a ticket, he has the teams for the day. So I think it is something that it's becoming a lot more common, which is true. I think obviously it does have negative effects because not everyone is as, self-restrained as they should be when it comes to it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, also, I wouldn't say I could deny the benefits of companies like that backing, the PSL, making it more commercial, being able to have more money in the game for the players. So I think there's obviously both edges to the sword that have to be balanced, but I think that we can't also deny that there is a good for the game that happens when you have big corporates backing it.
Yeah, but I think we need to let you cook more on this. Because, I mean, now you have an intention that has unintended consequences, right? So an intention is to elevate the game, exposure, funding and financing players, to focus. But at the same time, that money is from an industry that is essentially also possibly creating other negative impacts on communities. Because tomorrow, those are the same communities you and I live in,
exactly.
right? Where now all of a sudden there's no income because people are spending it, But I mean, I suppose you could argue the same with alcohol or all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
Like the understanding is that you're a responsible adult. But isn't it a worry that when we gamify it and make it easy, you start pulling people who are not necessarily...
Yeah, that's true. I mean, another thing is football and sports in general are social as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have these sort of corporates being able to easily sponsor or get into sponsor leagues, right? Is because of the social aspect, it's quite easily appealing for them as corporates to sponsor. So I think...
But shouldn't there be things that people can't
Definitely.
because of
Yeah.
the likelihood of the unintended consequence?
Yeah.
I guess is my parting shot on that. So now when you look at your business, say in the next 5 years, right? How many of the players you want to say, hey, that dude is playing in that league and he came through our platform?
Yeah.
In other words, what is your measure of success? And
I mean, my measure
like?
for success in 5 years would really be doing what we're doing right now, which is helping players get discovered, helping players go into more professional teams, uplifting them, but through the continent, really. I think that's one of the huge things we really want to do. We want to expand into the rest of the continent because there's a vast amount of talent, I mean, you just saw Sudan beat USA in the Olympics. Those are examples of hunger. That's another thing I just love about sports in general is that, and
it's
probably even life, it's about hunger, really. The hungriest win. And my point in saying that is we want all the people on the African continent that are wanting to be their best athletes to be able to do that through BallTalent. And if we can help more players to be discovered across the continent, that would be a measure of success for me.
But why stop at discovery? Why not management? Why not?
So you know why,
0.1%.
Because everyone says that. Everyone's like, oh, I mean, you've helped players. Why don't you become an agent?
You don't want to be a referee and a player.
So I think there's two parts here, right? The first part is to say that we also do work with Pro Sport International, right? Mike McCabe Jr. And essentially anything of that nature, they can essentially take over, right? Because we want to focus on our core business, which is helping talent to get discovered, right? Now, when you get involved in contracts and management agreements, yes, a lot of money in there, definitely. But that's not scalable because everyone needs to have their own terms and own conditions, But what is scalable is making a platform that anyone can discover talent on. And that's what our main mission is, especially across a huge amount of sports as well.
Then why stop there? Why not do music? Maybe I play an instrument. Like, how do I get, does it scale to other non-traditional avenues?
At this point, no. I think sports tech is really the niche we're after. I can say Simon and I, we have like 17 other coding ideas that we'd like to launch. So there could be something also talent in other
It
areas.
is.
But BallTalent specifically, it's just focused on sports, really.
I'm super stoked, man. Like, I just wish you nothing but success, onwards and upwards. And to your point, it is tech and it is sports. Like, I think you're hitting on such cool industries or verticals that are easily, firstly, scalable, but most importantly, anybody can fund this, right?
True.
Because it works on the continent, other continents. So, you know, so when you're looking to sell, or once you've sold and you exited, we want to have a follow-up conversation as to where you're going to spend this money on what new concept you are looking to do.
I definitely love to.
So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you so much.